Let me bottom line this episode for you. If someone senior opens your message and cannot immediately answer 3 questions, what do you need from me? Why does it matter? And what do you recommend? They are either going to skim your mail or ignore it. And both of these outcomes are expensive. Today, we're talking about the art of bottomlining, or how to stop sending 30-slide decks to people who absolutely do not have the time to read them. Hello and welcome to The Chaos of Scale, the podcast dedicated to helping scaling businesses navigate the human side of growth. I'm your host, Andy Golding, and today we're talking about the art of bottomlining, or how to give and get better information. As always, I promise to leave you with at least one thing to think differently about in how you work with others, and one actionable step to help you show up as a rad, or even more rad, human at work. You know the drill. Please like, subscribe, share, and if this episode saves you from writing your next 40-page masterpiece, a 5-star review would go a really long way. Let's start off with the reality of leadership attention. If you work in a scaling organization, your senior leaders are drowning. Not because they're incompetent, but because scale creates surface area. It's more people, more decisions, more complexity, and more noise. And by nature of this awkward growth, a lot of stuff funnels upwards to senior leaders, where yes, it absolutely should be more distributed, but it's not yet, because the chaos of scale. And in the middle of all of this noise, you send a 30-page slide deck asking for their attention and feedback. And let's be honest, why do we do this? Why do we send such deeply detailed information? We'll say that it's because we wanted to be thorough and we didn't want to miss anything, and we wanted to paint a full picture and we wanted to give full context. But actually, underneath that, it's often because we want to look smart. We want to prove that we've really thought it through. We want to protect ourselves from critique. And we might also just be very in love with our own thinking. But the harsh truth is that your 30-slide deck just adds noise to an already noisy environment. Remember, the higher up you go in an organization, the more expensive and thinly spread people's time becomes. You're probably deeply familiar with the bottlenecks that exist at the top of the organization, and how long some decision making can take, and how it delays things and sets things back. But maybe if there were fewer 30-page slide decks to read, we'd get things moving along a lot faster. But seriously, senior leaders are not trying to ignore you. And I can say this because I've been there. When I open your email and I see a giant document waiting for me, my immediate thought is, can I give this my attention right now? Because if I do engage with it, I want to do it properly. But with a giant chunk of information that I need to sift through and extract signal from noise, it can be extremely overwhelming. In a scale-up, leadership attention is the single most constrained resource, more so than budget, more so than headcount, more so than time. It is attention. So every time a leader is opening a document, they're subconsciously asking a few questions, like, what decision do I need to make? What do I need to know? Or what do I need to do? And if they have to hunt for the answer, they're most likely skimming your mail, skimming your document and guessing, or they're ignoring you, neither of which are great outcomes. And this is where bottomlining comes in as such a meaningful structure for thinking. Bottomlining is not dumbing things down. It is not oversimplifying. Rather, think of bottomlining as extracting the key signal from the noise. So what is bottomlining? If you've ever worked with a coach, you would probably be familiar with bottomlining. Often what happens when you work with a coach is they say, what's happening? And you just launch in, you just go, you speak for minutes and minutes, you go sideways, you justify, you speak in a circle, you essentially narrate your inner monologue. And then your coach is going to gently say, Can you bottom line it for me? Translation, if you had to land this plane in one sentence, what's true? Bottom lining is the discipline of extracting the essential message from the noise. In scaling organizations, this is pure gold. Because attention is the most constrained resource, clarity becomes a superpower. Do not underestimate what you can get done simply by cutting through the noise. Let me give you a quick example. Imagine that these 2 emails arrive in your inbox. Email 1. Subject, action required, sign off on customer profiling. Body, here's a 1-page overview of the profiles. Here's the deeper document. The 1-pager links to where you can find more detail. We need your sign off or comments by end of day Friday. That is a super bottom lined mail. Email 2 comes in and says, overview of potential pricing structures. Hi Andy, as you know, we've been working on the pricing structures for the new services launching in Q3. We compiled this deck to give you an overview of our thinking. We worked with sales, marketing, and procurement and ran into some challenges along the way, but this is where we landed. Attached. Open 45-page deck. Which email am I opening first? I'm opening email 1 because even the subject line was bottom lined. It told me action required and it told me what I needed to take action on. Which email is easier to action? Well, obviously email 1 as well. I know what they need from me from the subject line alone. They've extracted the key message, or they've taken the signal from the noise throughout the mail and told me this is what needs to happen. This is where I can find the information and this is when we need it by. And that's the goal, the beauty, the magic of bottom lining. Make it as easy as possible for people to act. Remove as much thinking work as possible from your reader, because communication gets expensive at scale. In scaling companies, mediocre communication becomes catastrophic because when you were 15 people in the room, context spreads through osmosis, but when you're 150, it doesn't anymore. So the cost of ambiguity increases. It slows things down. We start to see entropy creeping into the system. The cost of rambling increases. It gets in the way. We start to see more and more confusion. The cost of poorly framed decisions increases. It just adds muddiness to already muddy water. And bottom lining is not about being concise for the sake of it. It is about being responsible with other people's cognitive load. Let me say that again because I think this is the core of it. Bottom lining is not about being concise for the sake of it. It is about being responsible with other people's cognitive load. I know that all of the people I work with are overwhelmed, slammed, and surrounded by noise. So bottom lining my message to them makes their cognitive load easier. There is so much magic and possibility that lives in that line of thinking. But often what gets in the way of bottom lining can also just be ego, because we often equate the length of a document with the level of effort that we've put in. We think that as much detail as we can share signals our intelligence. And we often think that if I include absolutely everything, they'll see how much work that I've done, pats myself on the back. But your senior leaders are probably way more interested in how smartly you've done the work than how much work you've done. How are you helping to make it easier to make decisions and driving things forward? That's more of what matters to your senior leaders. That's what makes you look smart, accomplished, and like a key contributor. How are you helping to make it easier to make decisions and drive things forward? That's it. And you can absolutely attach the appendix. You can provide the deep context, but lead with the bottom line. Always. It's the same as don't bury the lead with the bottom line, because then at least if I stop paying attention after the first page, I actually have everything I need because you led with the bottom line. Bottom lining is the art of cutting through. So here's an example structure that you can use to do this. Before you send anything upwards or even across your organization, Try answer these questions and lead with the answer to these questions. What decision or outcome is required? What are the options? Give a maximum of 3 options. What do you recommend? So what's your thinking on it? And when do we need it by? If your opening paragraph or your first slide doesn't answer these questions, you are not bottom lining, you are narrating a story. And whilst narration is great, narration inside of a scaling organization just adds noise to an already noisy place. And I can already hear you're thinking, but Andy, it's way more nuanced than that. This has to be strategic. There's so much background here to be considered. And yeah, of course there is. You're absolutely right. There's always nuance. There's always background that matters. But here's the paradox. If you cannot articulate the bottom line, you probably haven't fully processed the nuance yourself. Bottom lining is a forcing function for clarity. It forces you to think. It forces you to prioritize, to confront trade-offs. Bottom lining is supposed to be uncomfortable because it makes you trim away the excess so that you're left with the key, the core, the crux, the main message. And if it's uncomfortable, fantastic, because in the chaos of scale, discomfort is often a sign that you're growing, and growth is wonderful. You see, if you start to think of attention as a privileged resource, when someone opens your message or reads your document or listens to your update, they are giving you something incredibly valuable, their attention. And if you start to treat attention like the scarce and privileged resource that it is, when you bottom line, you're saying, I respect your time. I've done the thinking. Here's what matters. And this builds trust. This shows you showing up as a key thinking partner, as a key contributor. This makes you a standout figure, somebody who's not afraid to take a stance, to make a recommendation. And this is who you want to be in a scaling organization, a thinking partner. Your action item from today's episode is, in the coming week, pick just one thing. One update, one email, one proposal, and before you click send, write the sentence at the top. The bottom line is, if you cannot finish that sentence cleanly, keep thinking. Don't add slides, don't add graphs, don't add footnotes, don't add context. Extract the signal from the noise. Add the bottom line is, and then send it. And ask your teams to start bottom lining too. Ask your teams to start every email with the bottom line is, this is what we need to do, this is why it matters, this is when we need to do it by. Not because we're becoming corporate and not because we want to stop sharing the details, but because we are being respectful of other people's time, because we are being responsible with other people's cognitive load. So here's the bottom line. Most of the time, scaling companies do not suffer from a lack of intelligence. They suffer from a lack of clarity. Every time you bottom line your thinking, you cut through a little bit more of the noise. You make decision taking easier. You make action faster. And you make leadership attention go further, which in a scale up might actually be one of the most valuable things that you can do. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Chaos of Scale. If this resonated, please share it with the colleague who loves a 47-slide appendix. You know the one. Please like, subscribe, share, and review wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Andy Golding, and remember, business growth is messy, but your thinking doesn't have to be.